So we are live. I'm waiting for some people to start joining in. If you're on your Facebook page, you can start sharing it.
All right, awesome. Let me get on here.
Okay.
Mhm.
Welcome everyone to Thrive Talks. So glad to have you. I'm Antoine Alcorn, licensed professional counselor, owner of Thrive Counseling here in Jacksonville. Welcome to Thrive Talks. It's been a year, and we are starting back with our live shows. And I'm so happy to have a good friend of mine, Pastor Jeff Bohannon, joining us tonight as our guest, as we're going to talk about grief and loss. Pastor Bohannon, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. I think this is a topic that we need to talk about. And so I'm glad to have your expertise and have you on the show with us tonight. If you will introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, man, look here, Dr. Alcorn, man, I am so thrilled to be on tonight, man. I am to the audience. I'm Pastor Jeff Bohannon. I pastor a small church in Olive Branch, Mississippi called the Grace Point Believers Church. We're right here in Olive Branch. We start at 12 o'clock at noon on every Sunday. I'm a simple man. I love Jesus. I'm a husband of one wife, Tamika. We have four daughters who all will be in college this coming August. And so God has been doing some unique things with me, man. I'm just goofy enough to follow the Lord.
Yes, sir. So again, Pastor Bohanna, thank you for agreeing to be our guest tonight to talk about this topic of grief and loss. I really
Hmm.
appreciate you. I appreciate the friendship and how that we met through another friend, a mutual friend, and
Right.
I just thank God for the friendship and the fellowship over the years. But let's get started with our topic on tonight. Pastor Bohanna, can
Okay.
you start by sharing just about your personal journey and what led you to become a grief and loss expert?
Yes, sir. Man, so my personal journey starts, man, with me before I even got in ministry. I am one who, when I say I understand what people are going through when it comes to death, loss, and grief, because of my personal experience. I lost my father at the age of 14. I lost my mother at the age of 17 as I was getting ready to go into college. And so I had to go into life. I had to go into life without my parents. I have no living paternal grandparents, and my two oldest sisters passed in 2014 and 2017. I've been pastoring uh, churches for almost 20 years, two different churches. In 2019, our church suffered a great loss from a young man who committed suicide, which really just really affected me in a great way. And then in 2021, God uniquely moved me into being a hospice chaplain. And so, with all that experience that I have experienced in life and being a hospice chaplain, um, God allowed me to be able to experience some things to also help others with this thing called grief. And so that's why I wrote the book. That's why I became a grief counselor, because it's not just something I've read about or studied, but it's something I experienced on my own. And so I use my own personal experience and the thing that I've studied to help me to help others, man, just deal with grief and loss.
Wow, so you lost both of your parents by the time you were 17 years old?
I was 17 years old.
Wow.
17 years old.
So
Yeah.
how did that experience, how did that shape your approach to handling grief and loss?
Man, one of the things it did was, particularly, my father wasn't really in my life. I didn't really know him that well. So when he died when I was 14, I remember going to his funeral, and I cried at his funeral. And people asked me, why did I cry? I said, I cried because I didn't know him, and I know I needed to know him. My mother was my whole world. So my mother died when I was 17. She died right when I graduated from high school, and I was getting ready to go to college to play football and enter my college career. She passed 2 weeks before I went to football camp, and so that was a great challenge for me. She instilled in me this sense of just keep going, just keep going. I remember particularly that I had a dream once in a dorm. Me and her were talking in my dream, and I don't know. I'm like Paul, whether I was in the body, out the body, I don't know. But I had a dream particularly, and she told me just keep going, keep moving. And so from that, man, I was just determined to honor her life with my life, just to be the best version of me I could possibly be. And so from there, not saying that I've been perfect, but just from there, man, I was just determined because of her loss to just honor her life with my life.
Wow. So in your book, Finding Peace, so to the audience, Pastor Bohannon is the author of this book, Finding Peace While Facing Pain. Down at the bottom of your screen there, scrolling there, the title of his book. It's available on Amazon. And then before we close out, he will let you know other places that you can purchase this book. But I encourage those of you that are watching to purchase this book, Finding Peace While Facing Pain. It's a great book, and I think it will help you through your grief journey. So in your book, Finding Peace While Facing Pain, you talk about the different stages of grief.
Right.
Can you briefly explain what these stages are and how people typically experience them?
Sure. Usually we are taught in grief counseling that there are 5 stages of grief. It is the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the acceptance, those things of the nature. And those are usually the stages of grief that people go through, even depression. I forgot to mention depression. And so those are usually the 5 stages of grief that normally people go through. However, just looking at my own experience and just doing some more research on those stages, I realized that everybody don't suffer those same stages. So one of the things in the book we write about is say that everybody grieves, everyone grieves, but everyone don't grieve the same. So everyone don't have anger. Everyone doesn't have bargaining. Everybody don't go through depression. Everyone doesn't have those moments of questioning God, And so I did a little further research. I found a certain doctor that works at Stanford University named Dr. Huberman. Dr. Huberman studies grief from a neurological perspective, which means that he studies grief. They study brain waves as it relates to grief. And what they found out was that grief was really a motivating thing as much as it is a devastating thing. So which means then grief is necessary. It's a necessary tool that we all have to go through to get through losing somebody close to us. Because if you don't grieve, you will slip into trauma and depression, and trauma and depression is where you don't want to be. So those are the stages of denial. But grieving is motivation. And one of the interesting things about grieving is that he suggests in the study that the same pain receptors in your brain that reacts when you are in pain, your body's in pain, is the same pain receptor your brain reacts when you're grieving. And so, which means that you are really in pain when you are grieving. It's pain. But one of the things about pain is that the unique thing, because I'm a person of faith, the unique thing is that how God uses pain always leads to strength when we embrace it. When we embrace it, accept it, and work through it, it always leads us to a place of strength. So that's why we suggest it's okay to grieve. So grieve, because one day strength will come from your grieving.
Right. Yeah, I often will have clients to ask me, when will the pain stop? When will this pain stop, right? And so as you were talking about those stages of grief, so people don't always go through those stages in a linear fashion,
right,
in the order. So one person may be at the stage of denial, and then they could go to the anger, right? So they
Mhm.
just move different. It is not in a certain order. Is that what I'm hearing you
Right.
say?
Yeah, it's not an order because here's why. Because people have different levels of relationship in relationships. So, for instance, me and my mother was very close.
Hmm.
I mean, and so when my mother passed, I did suffer the anger because I was like, God, why my mother? You know, why mine? You know, I didn't suffer bargaining because I didn't know what to bargain with God for.
Hmm.
I did have some issues with denial, of accepting that this is my reality. It took years for me to really accept that this was my reality. And so once I accepted it, and I learned that I got to deal with it on another level, because when God gave me children, I had to make sure that I can't spend too much time focusing on what I lost as much as I spend time on embracing what God gave.
Right,
And so,
right.
yeah.
So, what are some of the misconceptions about grief that you would like to address tonight?
One of the misconceptions about grief, the main misconception about grief, is that understanding that it's something that should be embraced and not avoided. I think what happens is, particularly in our community, in the Black community, we are taught, as especially Black men, we're taught to be tough. We're taught to be tough. We're taught to not cry. We're taught to not feel. We're taught that we got to be strong for everybody, and that's not the case, because as one of the sessions I just finished yesterday at St. Mark Baptist Church, was that one of the main things we always stress in every session is that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay if you're not okay, and it's okay to admit that you're not okay. One of the greatest lies we tell, particularly as Black men, is that when someone asks us we're okay, we say we're okay, we're fine. And when you have suffered a loss like
Yeah.
losing
So,
someone close to you, yeah, it's okay to say you're not fine. It's okay to not be fine, because here's the thing: when you're suffering the pain of grief, when you're suffering the pain of loss, pain is one indicator that something is wrong and needs to be fixed, and you cannot ignore pain, because if you ignore pain, it gets worse. There's an old saying that says, um, "Things get better, pain get better with time, wounds get better with time," and which is not true,
mhm,
because wounds don't get better with time, because if you don't treat them, then time make them worse. So
right.
what heals wounds and pain is treatment. You have to give attention to when you're hurting. So one of the greatest misconceptions of grief is not grieving. To think that you can just be tough and just keep moving, keep working, keep doing things to keep your mind off. And no, it's okay to grieve.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a message that we need to get out, that it is okay. Whatever we feel, it is okay. And I think society has conditioned men, particularly Black men, to suppress, right?
Hmm.
We feel like we always have to be strong. We don't
Right.
show your weakness. And so
Yes.
we suppress our feelings and our emotions. And so over time, we don't know how to be emotionally present, not for
Right.
ourselves,
Right.
not for our wives, our children. And so I think that that's important what you stated there, that it is okay to feel what you're feeling.
Mhm.
Right? And so with these misconceptions, how can someone support a friend or a loved one who is going through a period of intense grief?
Man, one of the greatest ways that you support somebody through grieving is not necessarily overly asking are they okay, but just letting them know you're there. Presence is the most important thing. The Bible said God is a present help in the time of trouble. Just letting people know that you're there is one of the most important things in grief, because one of the stages of grief that is very, very easily for people to slip into is depression. And one of the greatest remedies for depression is simply having somebody asking you, "Are you okay?" Knowing that somebody cares about you, knowing that somebody is there for you, is a good help. And so, one of the things that you help people with grief is that you make sure that they know that you are present for them, no matter what the help is. And it doesn't mean that you got to call them every day, but a text message, an email, a Facebook message, or something, just letting them know, "Hey, I'm here whenever you need." I'm not pressuring you to talk. I'm not pressing you to get out the house. I'm not pressing you to have company. I'm just letting you know I'm here. And I think that's one of the, it's simple, but it's profound, because what I found in my 20 some years of ministry, that is the simple things that brings the greatest healing to people.
Okay. So I want to take a moment to read one of the comments from one of the viewers.
Okay.
And she states, Anita states, hey guys, I'm glad you all went live with this. I lost my mom this year in January. I'm still
Okay.
grieving over my mom, and how you get past the grieving. I can't look at it picture or talk about my mom without crying. Sometimes I feel depressed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Let me say this to her, is that one day you looking at that picture, those tears will turn to smiles, because grieving will one day turn to memories, good memories. And here's the thing about one of the things that I always suggest to people is that don't rush grieving. Don't rush it. Take as much time as you need, because one of the things, there are two kinds of grief. There's complicated grief and there's non-complicated grief. Complicated grief is grief that lasts for a long time. Non-complicated grief is grief that lasts, it lasts, but not as long. It's when people are able to be sad but keep on moving. But then there are some cases where people lose their parents when they have a significant death. Let me address that real quickly. But in the book, we write about significant death, and significant death is what your job gives you 3 days of work for. So that's the sibling, that's the spouse, the siblings, the parents, the children, in some cases, grandparents and in-laws. But when you lose someone significant to you that's been close to you, those are harder deaths than just losing a friend, a cousin, or somebody you know. So when those deaths happen, you have to make sure that you give yourself time to heal. Don't rush it. That don't mean that you have to take more time at work, but if you need to take time at work, do it. Give yourself time to heal, and don't think that you are abnormal. Don't think that you something is wrong with you, but that when you lose a parent or a spouse or a child, that's a deep hurt. One of the definition of grief is deep sorrow, which means it's something that's deep, and because it's deep, deep wounds take time to heal. And if you try to rush healing, you may cause more problems. So I suggest to her, take your time and grieve, and do this. Do your best to understand that Mama is suffering now. That she, and do your best to talk to yourself about the good memories, the good times. Those things help out a lot. It won't replace the missing, but it'll help out with the grieving.
Thank you. So for those of you that are watching, if you have questions or comment, please feel free to put your question or your comment in the comment section there, and we will I'll acknowledge those as we go along. Pastor Jeff, Anita says thank you. Thank you for that. So the title of your book suggests that peace can be found even while we are facing pain. Can you, what are some strategies or practices that you recommend for finding peace during such difficult times?
Because I'm a person of faith, I rely on scripture to be that peace. One of the things I stress is the importance of peace. The Bible says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." And then the result of that, he says, the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your heart and your mind. That's your heart and your mind reflects on your emotions and your intellect, which means the peace of God will protect your emotions and your intellect, but it's given through prayer. So the first thing I suggest is prayer. Develop a strong prayer life. Prayer is where you find peace, because peace is important. Because here's the thing, I stress this all the time at our church, that peace is better than sleep. because if you don't have peace, you won't sleep. And so I stress a strong prayer life to develop that peace. And once you develop that strong prayer life that develops that peace, then you have to do some other things. Of course, reading scripture, but there's another practice is that stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself. The Bible said David encouraged himself in the Lord. And what happens is when we're going through pain, we will have this normal propensity to continue to talk to ourselves about everything that's wrong, about everything that's bad, about how bad we feel, about I'm missing, what I'm going to do now. But it's a good thing to start talking to yourself, just telling yourself we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. The one I lost is in a better place. I'm on one day I'm going to smile. Maybe not today, but one day I'm going to smile that I got to get better, that I got to depend on the Lord. And so one of the greatest things throughout the prayer is that you learn how to encourage yourself. The Bible said David encouraged himself. There's a song we used to listen to. I think I forgot the artist's name, but she says that encourage yourself in the Lord. So talking to yourself is a great way to do that. And then start journaling. Journaling is one of the most underappreciated ways of healing. And what I mean by journaling, write down the good. Write it down. Write down the good memories. Write down how you are determined to honor the life of the person you lost. Write down your goals. I mean, journal your feelings. Talk when you can't find nobody to talk to. Journal it. Then the fourth thing that I would suggest is something that we and I know you can appreciate it, Doc, that we as in a Black community don't appreciate enough is counseling. Counseling. Get counseling. Talk to somebody. Don't try to experience this. It's particularly if it's your first time experiencing this. Talk to somebody. Talk, particularly professional, but talk to somebody about these things. When we do grief counseling, at the end of every session, we have a session called "What's Your Testimony?" And the reason why we do "What's Your Testimony?" is because we give people a chance to talk. And what I've learned is that a lot of people are going through loss, haven't heard themselves talk about it. Right. And when they hear themselves talk about it, there's a release that they can't believe.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. One of the things that I will reinforce to my clients is going through grief is to talk about it. Gotta be able to release that through talking about it, journaling. So that's what I've found and with clients experiencing grief is one of the most effective ways for them to start that healing process is to talk about it.
Right.
And so appreciate you for sharing that. So you talked about counseling and professional help. When someone is going through grief, what are the signs? How do they know that it's during the grief process?
One of the things that if you just can't get back to life normal, if you find it difficult to get back to the normal function of life, you find it difficult to smile, you find it difficult to embrace hope, you find it difficult to see tomorrow, that's when it's time to get help. When you have lost interest, I am, to your audience, I am an admitted recovering just depressing person, if that makes sense. I suffered depression. I did. And I got professional help from my friend on here, Dr. Antoine Alcorn, and he helped me through my stuff. And because what happened was I went through some seasons to where I just lost interest in everything that I loved. When you feel that you lost interest and you've lost your drive to get out of bed, when you lost your drive to be motivated, when you lost your drive to hope again, that's when it's time to get help. Because as long we say this at our church every Sunday, if you woke, you won. If you're not dead, God is not done. And so if you're still alive, That means God still got purpose for you. And if you don't feel like moving, then you need help. If you don't feel like getting up and going, then that's when you need help. When you stop worrying about how you dress, how you look, how you feel, then it's time to get help.
And so what you just spoke to, or is how that grief can impact our personal lives, whether work, our relationships, our personal well-being. And one of the things that I've dealt with, and I would like to have you to speak about this, is I've seen parents that have their child pass away, and they have other children, and those the surviving children will often say to me, I feel like I've been forgotten, because the parent is and understandably so, they are so grief stricken that sometimes it impairs their ability to take care of the surviving siblings.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've had someone talk to me about was that when a parent loses a child and they have other surviving children, there is a undealt with fear that if I get too close to this other child, I'll lose him to her too. And so there's a fear that they don't want to experience this hurt that they feel now again with their very own child. And that's a uncommon thing. I mean, that's a real common thing for parents who lose a child who have other children. And then what's interesting is that child who has lost their sibling do feel that way, and they're struggling with, am I the bad child? I mean, was the one that lost was the good child, and I'm the bad one? And a lot of time, folks give a lot of attention to the parent, but not enough attention to the sibling who lost. I lost two siblings along with losing my parents, and so I was grown when I lost them, but I understand the feeling of I just lost two people that I grew up with, and so one of the things that help is that, particularly with families, when you have lost a loved one in the family, in the house, that's a child, a spouse, sibling, there's no greater time for you to band together than that time. That's why there's family counseling is needed. That's why families need to sit down and talk and deal with things head on. And of course, there's a season of shock. There's a season of surrealness that can't nobody say nothing. But there has to be a season. Here's why churches have to do a greater job of pushing counseling, pushing open dialogue with families. Here's why churches have to do a better job of pushing the idea that we have to talk about stuff that's bothering us internally. Because if you don't talk about stuff that's bothering us internally, then those outside just don't know how to deal with it.
Why do you think it's so difficult for churches to talk about those things or to address those issues?
I think because we have in the past, I think we got better, but in the past we've been so religious that we didn't understand relationship. I think we were so focused on the Sunday morning accomplishments. Do this on Sunday morning, do this for church, do this for Sunday, accomplish Sunday, but we weren't focused on the other days of the week. One of the particular things that I love about Jesus is that when Jesus comes on the scene, his whole ministry is not about church. It's not about temple. It's not about rituals. It's not about service. It's about people. His whole ministry. They asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And every time Jesus was asked a question about eternal life, he always brought it back to loving your neighbor. And so, which shows me that the Lord was concerned about relationships. So when we start seeing persecution hitting the church in the first few centuries, the writers would write to the believers and say, stay together. Don't forsake the assembling yourselves, the manner of some is. Had nothing to do with coming to church on Sunday. It was about staying together to keep encouraging one another the more you see the day approaching, as the text says. And so I think one of the problems has been with church is that we were so focused over the years on being right ritually that we wasn't right relationally.
Right. So if you're just joining us tonight on Thrive Talks, we have Pastor Jeff Bohannon, who is a pastor, grief counselor, author. He does it all. And if it's scrolling down at the bottom of the screen, his latest release is Finding Peace While Facing Pain. It's available on Amazon. Listen, you need to get this book. It's very insightful and very helpful as you're going through the grief process. So, Pastor Jeff, we were talking about children earlier. How can parents help children with grief? We were talking about how the parents may be struggling themselves, but how can a parent help their children through the grief process?
One of the things that parents need to do is own it and admit if you don't know what to do. I think one of the greatest things, one of my sicknesses over the years, because I lost both my parents so early, I was determined to be right, but I didn't know how to get to right. Because here's the thing: you can't do what you don't know. You can't look for what you don't know need to be found, and you can't ask a question you don't know to be asked. So I think the first thing for parents to do, if you don't know what to do, ask, seek help on how to help your children and help yourself. Seek help for your child, and that's of course professional counseling. So don't try. The worst thing that you could ever do is try to pretend to be a doctor when you're not a doctor. So the worst thing you can ever do is try to pretend to be a counselor when you're not a counselor. And so I think the first thing that parents would need to do is find help. And then in the meantime, while they're seeking professional help, is allow your children the space to be angry. And I know that may sound crazy. Allow them the space to express their emotions. Allow them to tell you what they feel, and allow them to know that this is a safe place that you can express how you really feel. This year, my baby girl graduated from high school, and earlier in the year, first of the semester, one of her classmates was killed in a car wreck. And the day that it happened, the night it happened, both principals called me and asked me would I come to the school the next day to just spend time at the school with the kids, doing counseling with the grief and everything. And one of the things that we did with the children all day long, of course, we prayed with them. But one of the things we showed, we kept stressing to them that this is a safe place that you can talk. Tell us how you feel. And if you don't know how you feel, tell us that. Tell us that I don't know how I feel. But the main thing is for young people that's dealing with grief and death, they haven't had the experience that some of us seasoned people have. But one of the main things about kids, young people, is that we have to get them talking, because they don't have the experience enough to know how to process some of this stuff. And so we need to know, how do you feel? And then we can deal with that, how you feel.
Yeah, that a lot of times the children, they sometimes don't understand the emotions, don't understand what they're feeling. So that's very important that we talk. And even, I know we're talking about coping with grief and loss, but kind of want to go back and touch on this about parents creating a safe place for their children to talk, and that's in general, right? So often, children be in the home and they're dealing with things and they suppress it, they hold it in. A lot of times the parents don't even know. So I think it's important that we create those safe places for our children so that they know that it is okay for me to talk.
Yeah. And I stress, I'm actually writing a book on marriage now with the same principle. That it's okay. We need, if we don't have a safe place nowhere, the safe place should be home. And one of the greatest ways to create a safe place is that knowing that we can talk about anything, that we can talk about what you're frustrated on. Because here's the thing: God didn't give us the ability to read minds, and since God didn't give us the ability to read minds, we got to create a safe place with our spouses and our children that you can express how you feel. And here's the thing, parents, do this: learn how to listen to learn, and not just listen to respond. Because a lot of times that we are listening just so I can hear how I'm gonna respond to it. No, listen to learn. And because what happens is if I'm hurting you and I'm talking to you, and I assume that you just listen to me so that you can debate with me, then I'm gonna shut down. But if I'm listening
Mhm.
to you and I believe that you're really listening so that you can be there for me and listen to my concerns to learn from my concerns, then I will open myself up to you.
Right.
And so learn to listen to learn and not just listen to respond.
That's good. Comment. Another comment. Kathy says, "Men helping men to help themselves to heal and doing gains a better family structure. Thanks for being transparent. Praise God for the both of you. Thank you, Kathy." So, Pastor Jeff, looking back on your journey, and what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned about grief and loss?
I guess the most surprising thing about grief and loss is the strength that comes from the process. Um, I've I'm amazed at the strength God has given me to have suffered so much loss, and then to be able to minister to people on a daily basis, being a hospice chaplain. I'm asked the question all the time: how in the world can you be a hospice chaplain and see death on an occasional basis? Because I have patients that I have gotten close to and they pass. And so now I got to go through grieving with patients that I got close to. We have patients that come on services and pass immediately, but then I have patients who've been on service for 3 years and I know
Mhm.
them personally. And so, and I think the greatest thing that I have learned from this is that there's a strength that's unexplainable. And here's why: there's the reason why the strength is unexplainable, because it's not a human strength; it's divine strength that God gives. So God never gives us. I was preaching this yesterday. God never gives us our own. That's why He doesn't give us our own peace. He gives us His peace. He doesn't give us our own strength. He gives us His strength. He doesn't even give us our own joy. He gives us His joy, because ours ain't good enough. And so what happens is when we go through the process of pain and go through the process of healing, God gives us this amazing strength and peace that we didn't even know existed, because without it, I can't be the husband I am today. I can't be the father I am today. I can't be the preacher, the pastor. I can't be the man I am today. I can't be the grief counselor nor the chaplain that I am today without their strength, because there are people relying on me to help them get to a better place than where they are.
Yeah. So, as a grief counselor, you talked about some of your patients that you get to know. You've been with them for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, uh, and you get to know them on a
Mhm.
on a personal level, and watching that and experiencing their passing. How do you go through that so often and you still be okay? So what do you do as a grief counselor for self-care?
Man, that's a great idea. That's a great question. That's a great question. Uh, Particularly, I do probably 15 funerals a year. Really, literally, I do probably 15 funerals a year, because most patients that come on our services, they're not able. They've been sick for a while and they're not able to get to church, and so I become their pastor. I have literal patients who have joined my church virtually because they don't have a pastor. And so I have grieved patients. I have cried before the funeral and after the funeral, funerals I've done. The thing I do now is, because the greatest thing that helps me is that I understand death. So in the first
Mhm.
section of the book, in the first session of every grief counseling I do, we talk about death. What is death? And so what has helped me, I
Mhm.
understand death. I understand one particular thing about death: that death is not elimination. Death is just separation. Death separates us from the issues, the pains of life, and it transitions us into a place called rest. And so we talk about the transition of peace for pain, that when a person leaves here, they are at peace and we are at pain for missing them. But while they're here, we're at peace because they're present, but they're in pain because they're here suffering. And so when they leave here, they transition and take the peace, and we take the pain. So what helps me along with a lot of things, I understand what death is, that death is simply a transition into a place called rest. And the other thing is that I have, in pastoring, I just learned how to enjoy life. I have, the early part of my ministry, I was so churched. Everything was church. I made sure my wife and my children, I traveled a lot preaching. I traveled the country. And now in these latter years, in my older age, I make sure I enjoy life with my wife and my children. I make sure that I take time just to sit down and watch football and go exercise. I exercise a lot now. And so I do things for me to make sure I take care of myself. And I understand that it's okay for a believer to have fun sometimes, to go out of town, to relax, to enjoy life. Solomon said, a time to dance, a time to laugh, a time to cry. I mean, and so I understand that you got to live. And so and that's one of the things that I talk about all the time, is that with people grieving, understand the day gonna come where you're gonna smile again. And when that day come, understand, get up and live. Go dancing, go out of town, live, enjoy life, because this day we only get one of these. It says God give us one of these. Make the best of the one that God gave you.
Right. Yeah, that's good. You know, I am transparent, and I would share with people, as a therapist, I have a therapist. And so that's just part of my self-care. And that's very important that we're doing that. So as you were writing the book, Finding Peace While Facing Pain, how did that impact your own healing process?
Particularly one of the things that you just said, you're a therapist with a therapist. So at the end of the book, I wrote the importance of counseling, because I had to get a counselor. And I asked the question is that who counsels the counselor, who pastors the pastor, who chaplains the chaplain? Because as long as you're human, you're going to need that. Your humanity will catch up with you one day. I don't care how much Bible you know, how long you've been preaching, how much ministry you give to others. One day you're going to need ministry yourself. And so as I was writing the book, I had to come to the conclusion of what helped me get better in my moments of need. And so whatever helps me in my moments of need, then I got to make sure that I suggest that for others. I'm a chef also. Me and my wife cook a lot. And so we pride ourselves on seasoning. And one of the things about seasoning and cooking is that I don't want to serve nobody nothing that doesn't taste good to me. And so I had to make sure that it's good to me first. Then I feel confident enough when I serve it to others, it's going to be good to them. And so in writing this book, I wanted to make sure that I suggested everything that helped me personally, that I know that it will have some help for others as well. And then also finding other suggestions through the channels of counseling profession that helps people deal with these things. And so those are the things that helped me out tremendously as I was writing the book.
Okay. So we've been talking about grief and loss, and we've been talking about it a lot of times in terms of death. But can you speak to that when we talk about grief and loss, other ways that we experience that, not just when there's a death?
Right. Yeah. Grief is a broad definition because it's related to losing something. People grieve over and I'm totally transparent. One of my daughters, I got 4 daughters in college. One of my daughters had she's very ambitious. She's at Jackson State. She's a senior at Jackson State. She is now the president of the campus board activities. She is very ambitious. She's a double major. she has, I mean, she just want to be in everything. And so there was
Mhm.
particularly one thing that she was really, really hoping for that didn't come through. And it devastated her. I mean, to the point of depression. And I called you about her. And so she grieved as if she lost her parents or her siblings with that. And so the idea of grief is from the perspective of losing something that you had really hoped for. There are things that in life we really pray for, we work hard for, and we don't get it.
Right.
And those are the things that we have to come to a place in life that it just wasn't either meant to be or it's not meant yet. I said it one more again. It's either not meant to be or it's not meant yet in this season. And so those are the things that in life I teach my children, I teach the church, and I have to brace myself that just because you haven't gotten it don't mean you won't get it. And if you don't get it, understand there's something greater for you. And so people grieve of losing something that they held dear, that they was trying to get. People have been, I've seen people devastated from losing a job they've been on for 15, 20 years. And then all of a sudden the doors close. That's a great loss because now life has to, you have to readjust life. Now, what do I do now? I've been doing this all my life. The thing called cognitive dissonance, that mental struggle of now I have to readjust my thinking because this is the way I've been thinking all this time. Now, what do I do? And I always come to this, and I don't mean to sound preachy, but I always come to the conclusion of this, is that if you're still living, there's still hope. And let me say this. My favorite line in the Bible is one simple verse, Romans 12:12. My favorite line. And here's what it says. It says, rejoicing hope, steadfast, rejoicing hope, endure tribulation, and continue steadfast in prayer. Paul says, rejoice in hope. Hope is expectation, right? So Paul is saying, don't rejoice in what you are experiencing, rejoice in what you are expecting. So then you have to change your expectations when you're going through certain things so that you can rejoice in what you're, and most of us have to expect that things going to get better. So don't rejoice in what you're experiencing, rejoice in what you're expecting. And he says, endure tribulation. That means that you have some patience while you're going through what you're experiencing, and how you have patience and while you're going through what you're experiencing, you get a prayer life. And so that's my favorite line in the Bible because that's just life. Rejoice in your hopes. Hang in there and keep praying because it's going to get better.
Yes, sir. Yes. So, Pastor Jeff, so if you could, as we are coming to the conclusion of tonight's show, if you could share one piece of advice for someone that is currently struggling with grief, what would that be?
Particularly get counseling, get help, talk about it. Don't avoid it. Don't deny it. Don't try to cover it up. You know, if you sweep trash under the rug, it's still gonna be under the rug. So don't sweep it under the rug. Deal with it head on. Attack it head on. Get counseling. Talk about it. And here's the other thing: understand this, that one day it'll get better. I don't know when that day is. I don't know how long it's gonna take you to get to that day. But I promise you, one day it will get better. You're going to smile again one day. The memories that cause you to cry now are going to be the memories that cause you to smile later. So if I can tell you one thing, get counseling and just understand it's going to get better.
So how can our listeners find more information about your work and your book?
Okay. In the chat room, I just put a link that you can get the book there in the chat. That's my personal link that you can get the book. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a page called Pastor Jeff Bohanna Ministries that you can follow me on Facebook, and of course my personal Facebook page, Jeff Bohanna. We post everything there. Our church page is Grace Point Believers Church. We are very active on our Facebook page, so most of the stuff that we do there, and in the very near future, I'll be starting a podcast called Finding Peace While Facing Pain. But if you just go to my Facebook page and look me up on Facebook, you can find everything about me there.
And I will tell you, Pastor Jeff, I've read your book. I ordered extra copies. I actually give this book to my clients that are going through the grief process, that are experiencing grief and loss, and I actually use that in my sessions with some of my clients, and it's been very beneficial as we're working through that. So for those of you that are tuning in, we have Pastor Jeff Bohanna with us, a grief counselor, author of Finding Peace While Facing Pain. If any of you have any questions or comments, we would like to address those on tonight before we end the show. So if you have any questions about grief and loss, go ahead and put those questions in the comment section there, and we will words before we get off. Any last words before we get off, Pastor Bohanna? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can. I would say, man, thank you. Some of you that are listening, Dr. Alcorn contributed to the book because he's been a good counseling friend, a good friend of mine over the years. I asked him to do a segment in the book, interview type segment in the book of the importance of counseling. And so he was gracious enough to do that for me in the book, because I wanted to really because he has helped me, as my people would say in Mississippi, not just help, but he's helped me. He's helped me so much over the years. I wanted to make sure that I included him inside this work. And I'm so grateful tonight, because as the older I get, the more I do this, the more I see that there's a need. And this is something divine that God has assigned me to do. And so I'm just goofy enough to, man, follow God's orders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you again. Appreciate the friendship, the fellowship, and you agreeing to come on tonight. Want to thank all of you for tuning in and to Thrive Talks. We hope that you got some insight into this grief and loss process. I also want to announce that the next show, we will have a guest on, and we're going to be addressing performance anxiety in high school athletes. Mr. Marquise Walker, licensed professional counselor, and former college athlete. He's going to be on the show, and we're going to be talking about performance anxiety in high school athletes. So, yeah, coaches, parents, trainers, if you have a high school athlete that may be experiencing performance anxiety, you want to tune in to the next show to hear from Mr. Walker regarding that. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Pastor Jeff. And we will be speaking with you next time. In the meantime, want to, as I always tell everyone, to keep thriving. Have a good night.
Bless y'all.